which I have
visible in the Can You Canoe video is the hat from Feedra Clips. I didn't realize until you showed a clip from it just now.
I love how we are hanging on to these things just in case.
It's a family heirloom. It's actually quite valuable, apparently.
That's amazing. Yeah, so it's back behind this shoulder. Hi, Molly. My sister's here.
Hey, Molly.
Oh, and we are at time. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I've lost my ability to speak. Hello, everybody. We are going to get started. I'm just going to share a little quick countdown video, and feel free at home to shout 10, 9, 8, etc. I feel weird doing it on Zoom with people, but this
the offsets and delays will be just so hilarious.
It'll be so weird. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Eugene Dishonesty. Okay, let's do it. Okay, here we go. I'm sharing the screen, and I got to back up to the beginning, and here we go. This is our official countdown to launch. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Lift off.
Amazing. Album launch sequence initiated. So I am here with some wonderful people who are the people who helped me make this album. So we have Kristin Mueller-Heaslip, who's going to be my co-host, and she's the co-conspirator not only on this album, but on work I've been doing with her for almost 20 years, which we'll be talking about. Daniel Ramjatan's here. He played guitar on the album. Jennifer Tran, who played saxophone on the album. Paul Talbot, who was our recording engineer and did editing and mixing, which was very collaborative, and we'll talk about that later. And missing right now are Elaine Lau and Joseph Ferretti, who played piano on 2 different tracks. They'll be joining us at 3:30. They have a former obligation. So thank you to everyone who's come so far. I'm just going to get Daniel, Jennifer, and Paul to turn off your cameras right now, and we'll just sort of keep it focused on the people who are kind of like on stage at the moment. So Kristin, we are gonna, I think, just jump right in and play the first track on the album. I've made kind of a music video, and then let's sort of depart from that to talk about like what the heck this whole project was about and what the process was. So I'm just gonna share that screen, and hold on one second. I'm gonna have to go to my next tab. There we go. Pardon me. Oh yeah, feels just like teaching to teenagers again. I'm juggling windows. All right.
We cast this message. We cast this message into the cosmos. It is likely to survive a billion years. A billion years into our future. Into our future when our civilization is profoundly altered. Of the 200 billion some, perhaps many, may have inhabited planets and spacefaring civilizations. This is a present from a small, distant world, a token of ourselves, our science, our images, our music, our thoughts, our
So this little music video I put together for the first track on the album as a kind of intro to what this whole thing's about. So Kristin, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. Yeah. So I thought it might be neat to just start by talking about like what this whole thing is about. Like, what was the origin of the album, and like what is this present, and what small distant world is it from? So why don't we start with like, when did we first have this idea?
I remember, when was it? 2016 or 2017, something like that. We got together and took our children to the park and
We were in the
talked about
playground.
it.
That's right.
To the playground, and you said you had this idea to do a record of all of the different music we'd done together.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to you, is like, if you just want to do this and you want someone else, I am fine with that. Because I can't say that my career has been the most lively in the new music field of late, but no, we went ahead with it, and it's the rest is history. So here we are.
Yeah, I mean, we have a long history of working together. I mean, it's almost 20 years.
Yeah.
One of the pieces on this album, the Dennis Lee songs, that's from, I think I wrote that in 2001, and you did one track of it, like Alligator Pie, wasn't it on my undergrad recital?
I think so, yeah.
Owen Pallett and I did this graduate recital together. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
And so that piece was premiered then, and then I wrote the rest of it, and we did it later that summer. So that was
that's right.
2002. That would have been. So 19 years, yeah. So we wanted to make an album of like a compendium of different projects we'd worked together on over the years, because they're not just straightforward, like I found a text and wrote a piece and Kristin sang it. Like, we did collaborations as well. Like, we're going to talk about Time Will Erase, where you actually wrote the libretto as well.
That's right. I think Dennis Lee might have been 2001, and I recall doing it. I had this idea to do a concert, and because you can just do those things when you're like 20 years old, and just ask your friends to be a string quartet and play for you. And so I was like, Alex, and just ask your friends to like write you some music. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, and this album is just like a one cross section of some things we worked on. There were others that just weren't practical, or things we were happy enough to see lost in the mists of time. Like, like that wonderful Fringe show we did together in 2005, Adieu Friedrich Lips. I mean, the music just wouldn't survive on an album, you know, it just wouldn't make sense without the play. So this is like the art music that we've done, but we didn't want to just be like, okay, here is an album of our music. We wanted there to be a through line. And this is my recollection of our thinking, our thought process is like, we're putting an album out there and we don't know if anyone's going to listen to it. And that's actually kind of beautiful. And at the same time, I was very interested in like space exploration, and still am. And I got into researching the story of the Voyager spacecraft, which there were two of them launched in the late 70s. I think it's 77 and maybe 78. And both of them contain something called the Golden Record, which is the sounds of Earth. And you actually saw it spinning around in that video. So the sounds of Earth includes like spoken greetings and images and music from Earth, but it also includes this speech by President Jimmy Carter at the time. And that's the text that Kristin is singing in that first track, A Present from a Small Distant World. So the present is this album from humanity that more likely than not, no alien species will ever intercept or be able to decode. But if they can, it'll last for 1 billion years. So that's where that all comes from. So, and we're going to talk later to Daniel Ramjatan, whose guitar and electronics pieces on the album tie the whole thing together with this sort of Voyager theme. Yeah, so let's pop on to the next video, right? Which is something quite different. So I'm going to go over to here. And so this is the Sonnet. And there it is. Okay.
But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou west. Nor shall death this. And this gives life to thee.
So that is a quite different text, of course. That's Shakespeare from Sonnet 18. Do you want to tell the story of this piece and how it didn't get premiered?
Yes, absolutely. So this Alex wrote and asked me very kindly to perform at his wedding. And I caught laryngitis or I lost my voice. I got sick and I lost my voice like the day before the wedding or possibly the day of. Like I went to the wedding, and actually there's a great picture of me holding my son, who was a baby at the time, with this absolutely like evil expression on my face because my throat really hurt. Because I guess people used to do that. We used to go places when we were sick back in 2012. That sounds pretty monstrous now. So it did not get premiered at that. I think
we did it a year later at a
year later, and I did it a couple times because I love singing unaccompanied repertoire because I love to show off, and I love the different things that composers do to create texture with just one voice.
And this was meant to be like a duet with nature, because the wedding was outdoors at the Ben Miller Inn, kind of near Goderich on Lake Huron, but it was by a creek and, breeze in the trees. And so I wanted to imagine that the voice emerged from all these natural sounds. And that's why Kristin has this unworded music. Let's talk about, this text is Shakespeare. The last one was Jimmy Carter. There's quite a variety of texts on the album. Is that just because we always have different ideas and we never want to do the same thing twice? What else do we have on this album? We have Yeats.
Yeah, we have Dennis Lee, famous Canadian poet.
Yeah, so that's like children's nonsense poetry.
We have me.
We have a libretto you wrote, which we'll talk about. We have Scintillator.
Yes.
What is Scintillator?
Scintillator is the text of a spam message I received in about, 2007 or something like that. Probably in the heyday of spam emails when we all got them, and they were just super weird. So it's a collection of random strings of text from, I don't know, I think you did find some of the sources, didn't you? Where some of them came from?
Some of them, yeah, because these email bots crawl around the internet and they find different things and stitch them together. And you ended up thinking there were probably kind of 4 different sources, or at least you imagined 4 different characters.
Yes.
Right. I'm just going to throw the score up here while we're talking. So yeah, Kristin, these highlights here, she actually highlighted, what were can you remember offhand what you called these 4 characters? It was just sort of your private names for them.
I didn't, yeah. So the first one was like, the green, no, not green. Oh yeah, the pink one is like some kind of grand opera that no one does anymore, which is, there's many. If you ever go to the opera shelf in a music library, there's a lot of dust, and there's something which is, I feel so sad. And sometimes it's great and you're like, no one is ever going to sing this again, and it's very sad. One of them was like corporate Bach.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And there was the voice of the machine, which I think is the yellow. And then green was something
there was like
else.
loopy Sprechstimme or something like that.
That's right. Green. So you had like 4 different ways of singing, and we recorded them that way for like 4 completely different, not just takes, but like modes of recording. And then afterward, I also gave them each a color of static, because we reimagined this piece from what used to be a live piece to something that is floating through space, being broadcast by this like Voyager type satellite, right? To possibly no one listening. So I'm just going to play a little bit of it. We're going to see how well this works, because Chrome was giving me trouble earlier. But this is the same visualization that I set up for my music video at the beginning. It's called butterchurn.viz, and I'm going to do a live one right now. It's going to be, who knows what's going to happen.
Psychedelic. I love it. I have one other story about Scintillator, which is that I performed it in a recital once, which was interrupted by a bagpipe procession.
Yes, well, that's the day we recorded it. And so until we made this album, that was the recording I had, and you couldn't hear it very well. It was very faint, but because it's a piece made of random texts, there's something kind of reminiscent
very fitting about it.
Yeah, there's something reminds me of John Cage with that. So yeah, here we go. So let's listen to a little bit of Scintillator. there. You got to hear all four voices sort of one at a time, and then they all sing 1,200 years together. It's a bloody weird piece. Like, let's just put it out there. But our conception was much like a Voyager satellite, which is moving ever steadily out of our solar system and thus getting farther from anything humanity has ever known or understood. We start with the more sort of conventional texts like a president, Shakespeare, and then they get a little stranger and more personal and more mysterious as we go. So Scintillator is actually one of the last pieces on the album. So where's my schedule? Yeah, so we are going to bring Jennifer out right now and talk about the heart of the album, which is called Time Will Erase. So Jennifer, do you want to turn your camera on? And Kristin, let's talk about the origin of this. You wrote the libretto. What was the event and the goal? Because this was part of a set of librettos you wrote.
It was. I had this idea. So I got it, as a lot of us do, I think, is I was like, well, let's start producing stuff. Let's be the impresario as well as the performer. So I had this idea to produce short operas for one singer and a saxophone. Just as a friend of mine who played the saxophone, we were going to do it together. And I wanted to do them on real people. So one of them was on Anna Akmartova, who I actually can't remember anymore where I learned of her, but she's this Russian poet with this amazing life story. And the other two were Dame Edith Sitwell, who is also a very interesting character from the British literary tradition. Read her book called English Eccentrics because it's great. And the other one was Tammy Faye Baker, and I still have both the wigs and the puppets from the Tammy Faye Baker one because that was a puppet opera.
I was thinking of that piece the other day, not long ago I was listening to the podcast You're Wrong About, and they did a wonderful episode about Tammy Faye. Boy, she misunderstood. What a sad life. Yeah.
But so that was my idea, and I came up. We worked on the libretto together. I also had an idea of one about Ada Lovelace, which was going to involve some singing robots, which our good friend, our mutual friend Dave Ogborn had. But the robots were kind of unintelligible. They weren't ready for prime time, and we had some creative differences about stuff, and we ended up scrapping that project. So maybe someday we'll do the singing robot opera.
But you produced 3 of them as like a back-to-back thing in 2010 in like Kensington Market, right?
Yeah.
So this is like 10, 11 years old. Yeah. And so this was actually a staged opera, and it was a little bit longer than what shows up on the album. We cut some scenes that really only made sense theatrically, but we were going to cut it more. And then Kristin was like, can we keep this part? Can we keep this part? You wrote the libretto, but there's one part you didn't write, and that's actually the excerpt we're going to hear. So do you want to just why don't you tell us who was she, and what's the basic story here?
So this is one of her poems translated by a British poet called Don Thomas, and thank you very much to his representatives for allowing us to use them. Anna Akmartova was a kind of sensation pre-revolutionary Russia. She was a sort of scandalous celebrity in the artistic sets, and then when the revolution happened, that didn't go so great for her, and she was various levels of what's a good way to put it, she was in various levels of favor and disfavor with the authorities, had a lot of really awful things happen to her. I won't go to the whole story. There's some great biographies of her, which I'd encourage people to go read if they're interested in her and her work, and also just go read her poetry because it's great. It's way better than mine. That's why we picked this one. I was like, we have to do this one because it's the best thing, because she was an actual great writer.
So I think at this point I'm going to introduce Jennifer. We've had you come on and then just stand there. That would have been really awkward in the live show. I don't know anything about hosting. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being part of this album. We met because I originally was going to work with Chelsea Shanoff, who I knew, and she had some issues, was not able to do the album. And I was like, I don't know many sax players, especially not awesome ones. So could you recommend someone? And she said, well, there's a younger generation sax player who's like studying at UFU right now and like just absolutely phenomenal. And she introduced us, and we sat down for a first meeting, and you took this so seriously. Our first meeting, there was no playing of saxophones. We sat down with the score for over an hour, just talking about like what tone quality you were going to use in each part. And then you came into our first rehearsal a few months later, and it was like, that you totally brought this piece to life, doing things that are not on the page that I may never write into the score. It's more just like your own interpretation. So I just thought we'd just play this excerpt and then talk to you about what it was like to go through that process, okay? So then you can kind of respond to what I'm playing. All right. Oh, I need to open the video so that it's ready. Oh yeah, no, it's there. I know what I'm doing. I really do.
But I warn you, I am living for the last time. Not as a swallow, not as a maple, not as a reed, nor as a star, not as water from a spring, nor as bells in a tower, not as bells in a tower shall I return to trouble you. Nor visit other people's dreams with lamentations.
Right, so I don't know how well the end carries there, but Jennifer just holds that last note just so beautifully on the album, and also in this semi-live performance.
Yeah.
Jennifer, are you still here with us?
Oh, I think Jennifer might be frozen.
Oh,
Oh,
hey,
here we go.
by the way, nice product placement, Kristin. I saw this
Thank
next
you.
to you in the in the video. So Jen, what was it like to work on something like this, where it's like an opera, it's got to be dramatic, but it's just you and a singer and you're not even on stage? Oh, did she freeze again?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jennifer.
I can hear you. Yeah, great.
We can hear you.
All right, I think the last thing I heard was how did that work?
Yeah, what was it like
On
to
this?
to work on a piece that was originally like an opera, it's meant for the stage, but for this like album, and like what's your process to kind of play with as much like character? Like you totally turn the sax into almost like a person. So like what was the process for you in kind of bringing this to life?
So when I first got the piece and the project, thank you, shout out to Chelsea. I looked up Anna Akmartova, and as like you said before, when we got to meet each other and talk about how you want this played out, trying to understand because I don't think I'll fully understand the weight of her life as someone who writes and does art in resistance to state censorship and so amongst other things. And taking that idea of as a writer, as a poet, and turning that art form into more an oral culture, and also on top of that, underneath an underground culture, over the whole grand scheme, being resistant in that sense. And her works are mainly of like meditative on time, meditation, on emotional restraint. And I wanted that, or at least when we discussed it, we wanted that kind of feeling to make sure that we're creating a scene, because of course it's a dramatic opera, but we're bringing her story to life in a sense.
Yeah, like I felt like when we first met and in our rehearsals, like I was talking with you almost like a dramaturge or a theater director more than as a composer, and then we would figure out like, what did we mean actually? What is the sound we're after? But it starts with that emotion and that character, right? And I think it really comes across. So when you listen to the album, you'll hear like it really is just Kristin and Jennifer. There are 3 moments, I think, Paul, where we do like a kind of an effect on there's a key click thing she does, and we enhanced it with sort of some special musical things. Oh, all right, some others of our guests are here. That's fantastic. Yeah. So thanks so much, Jennifer. I'm going to bring Daniel on and Jen, if you want to just stay on. Oh, we got to plug something. Jennifer Tran is playing with the National Arts Center Orchestra. What piece are you playing? And when is it?
I'm playing Darius Milhaud, Scaramouche, for saxophone and orchestra, and it's
classic.
On Saturday, February 27th. It'll be aired live stream on the National Arts Center Orchestra's website, or I think it's also Facebook too. And it's at 8 p.m. EST.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, I got a sponsored ad pop up. I was like, it's Jennifer Tran.
Oh my God, I know her.
Also, Jennifer was in CBC's, is it top 30 under 30 musicians? Am I getting that right?
Yeah. 30 classical musicians. Yeah.
Classical musicians, which is pretty awesome. And like, that's not even why we hired her. Yeah. Like, that was just a wonderful thing. But it goes to show where it's not just us who appreciate you. Yeah. Daniel, do you want to come on and join us here?
Sure.
Yeah. Hey.
Hey. How's it going?
Yeah. Were you going to say, Kristin, it'd be cool to do this live with Jennifer someday? Because I think it would too.
It would be amazing. And I have to say, saxophones are really hard instruments to play with people. Like voices and saxophones is a really weird idea. And it was 100% situational way I came up with it.
Yeah.
And Jennifer was so great because a lot of the time when you play with a non-accompanying instrument, like it's like there's not that same kind of collaboration like you get when you're with a pianist or a guitarist who have a tradition of playing together with singers. But she was just the best. So please, she does not need me to push her, but please continue to hire her for your weird saxophone projects.
Yeah.
Everyone.
It was quite a great experience working with someone who takes like music, approaches it so dramatically. I have no words anymore. They've just gone. Daniel. So Daniel Ramjatan, he's the guy who never worked with Kristin on the album. And yet it's like they have this dialogue. So we have essentially 5 tracks. The last one's kind of hidden because there's voice over top of it. But where these are pieces I wrote for Daniel for the 21st Century Guitar Conference a year ago. And then we're like, hey, let's put these on the album. And this is another thing where I had approached a guitarist I knew, Rob McDonald, he appears on the album as samples. Okay, but he was like, you know what? I can't take on another piece for the conference. So for this live version, why do you get Daniel to do it? And then he's like, well, then, and have Daniel do the recording as well, because I always knew it was a double thing. So these pieces are the most direct link to the theme of the album. This is what makes it a concept album, because Daniel, what did we talk about? We were imagining that you are the Voyager satellite.
Yes.
Like the guitar is the voice of the satellite.
Yes. So and very, very literally, because when you gave me the score, the whole thing was actually just like a giant piece of paper.
I'm going to share a screen while I keep talking. I'm going to share a screen.
Please do that. Yeah. The score was a giant piece of paper. And it actually, exactly. There we go. So it just has a bunch of lines, and what you see here is Morse code. So the guitar is actually playing in Morse code and actually saying the words ad aspera ad astra.
Yeah, which means, so ad aspera ad astra, sorry, per aspera ad astra means
yes,
through hardship to the stars. And this was actually written on the golden record in Morse code as a visual thing. So we turned it into the voice of the golden record and the satellite as though it's broadcasting through hardship to the stars again and again. And these are the first two movements use the same score, but then you had different instructions of how to play it for the two movements.
Exactly. So I had to play it at different speeds as they go into different phases. As the Voyager spacecraft leaves the solar system gradually over the 5 movements, it goes into these different periods. So yeah.
And there always, I guess, was going to be an electronic part as well, right? So you're the satellite. The electronics are like the different phases of space. So we start with Heliosphere, which is like the what we live in. It's the sort of the space weather closest to the sun. And then there's termination shock, which is if you actually like take a rocket ship out there, suddenly the solar wind just cuts in half and the magnetism changes, everything feels different. And so we're trying to reflect that.
Down.
Yeah. And then there's Heliosheath, which is like an intermediate layer as you're leaving the solar system. Then there's heliopause, and we're going to play a little of those movements in a sec. And then the last movement, I mixed Kristin in as well, singing To the Makers of Music, All Worlds, All Times, which is another thing. It's actually handwritten on the golden record. It's not recorded. It's not even printed. Someone hand wrote it on it just before they slipped it into the Voyager spacecraft, which I find just beautiful. To the Makers of Music, All Worlds, All Times. And that guitar piece is called Interstellar. So here's the Heliosheath movement, which is a Bach Gavotte, which is actually one of the pieces of music for violin on the golden record on Voyager. And Daniel played it, and then we hear it sort of breaking transmission. I'm going to play that in a moment. And then he plays a version of it that's all screwed up and mixed up with this Morse code transmission as we get farther from Earth and into weirder zones of space weather.
Yes.
As our solar system is breaking down. And then Interstellar, this is real. The Voyager satellite is currently, it was launched in 1977. They are both currently leaving our solar system, but they won't be completely out for 30,000 years. They are in what is called the Oort cloud, which is bigger than you could possibly ever imagine. It is a sphere of basically asteroids that will take it the next 30,000 years to get through. And in 40,000 years, finally, Voyager satellite number 2, I think, will be closer to another star than to our own in 40,000 years. But that's only because that star's moving. Yeah, so that is the star that is literally being aimed at in this score. And that's the thing in the center. And so Daniel is playing this improvisation where he plays all these dots of other stars as bits of the Morse code. And that's the last track on the album. So we're going to play, I'll stop sharing the images here. We're going to play a little bit of the movement Heliosheath, which I'm just going to cue up here. Oh, I see what I need to do. I need to do my share screen first. I'm going to go back to butter churn. Do a little visualization with this. Who knows what will happen? You never know. Oh yeah, the chord at the beginning is from the Dennis Lee songs.
So
yeah, that's the actual Morse code because I mixed in a bunch of synthesizer sound that wasn't in the original live pieces. There are so many layers here. Yeah, I just wanted to play a moment of that. So yeah, he's playing this transmission of a Bach song that keeps getting interrupted in a way. Now the electronics, Paul Talbot, do you want to come on, talk about that? Because I could not have made these movements without you. Like I made my own mix of these with like the electronic sounds and Daniel and did kind of that first edit, but then I handed it to you and you did things with it like I don't understand what you did to make these sounds
Basically,
so much like they are floating through space.
a lot of it was, just a lot of delay and reverb. The sound that you heard just at the very end of that last bit where it kind of went it's a technique called sample and hold. So
Oh yeah.
just the very end clip of one of the notes ran into the sampler and then held it and then volume swelled it into the next bit.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the short term for what I did.
And there's reverse stuff too. There's like, it's really, really interesting. Daniel, I'm just going to play a little bit of you in the studio doing the next movement because you get into some really like funky guitar techniques here. So here's Daniel doing a little bit of the Heliopause movement without electronics. Like he's just messing around in the, like before we recorded.
I pretty much had to improvise this whole thing. So it was really exciting.
That's a brass slide, right? So this is us. This is like the first moment we recorded. Daniel came in first. This is over a year ago, January 2020, at Union Sound Studios in Toronto. I just recently refound all these like awesome videos. I'm going to play you some more. Oh, my screen sharing. No. Cool. So that's sort of the gel that holds this album together. So Elaine Lau and Joseph Ferretti have joined us. If you folks want to say hi so your video pops up for people.
Hello. Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to go straight into playing this tiny little backstage video of Elaine playing a little bit from Stolen Child. And that's all we're going to hear from Stolen Child today. But then we can just talk a little bit about that experience. So here we go. This is not like something we recorded. This is like getting ready to record. There's Paul walking around, setting up mics and taking pictures of his setup. Kristin, you dressed so well for these recording sessions.
I thank you. I'm glad I did because there's more videos than I was expecting of just me standing around in the studio.
Well, yes, I did get everyone have an opportunity to veto them, and there were some attempts to veto that then people. Elaine, you decided you didn't look that bad after all, I suppose.
Oh, well, you know.
You sound good to me. Like so this is Stolen Child, which I originally wrote for Nathan Letourneau, who's a tenor, and then I redid it a little bit for Kristin. So this is the one, the text is by W.B. Yeats, and the idea is of a child being stolen by fairies. And so over the course of this piece, it's like a pastiche. You've got this kind of folk song that Kristin sings, which we didn't hear yet. Very sort of Scottish Highlands sounding thing. And then we've got these strange piano interludes. And then we also have like Kristin taking on a completely different voice as this kind of elf king, this like Earl König almost, like beckoning the child to come and live with the fairies. And as the piece goes on, it gets stranger and stranger and more like the music itself is turning into this kind of fairy mush that we can't hear properly. So that's what Elaine is playing there, is some of that kind of weird, strange interlude. It's a bit romantic, but it's also a bit like there's a code there that we don't totally understand. What was it like for you, Elaine, to play this piece that like has so many different modes of playing in it?
Well, I guess it was sort of, you could say it's also multi-layer in experience too, where it's, as you said, like it has that sort of romantic, lush quality, but the other side of it, or the darker side of it. So thinking about how it isn't just getting, it accurate, but also like an effect right in that run, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And we spent quite a bit of time talking about like tone and the feel of it. This is a nightmare piece for transitions too. Is this one of the ones we did 100 takes on? Probably not quite. Paul, do you remember?
100 complete. We didn't do 100 complete takes of
No,
anything.
no, if anything, but we did lots of like little bits,
Little bits.
right? We did the transitions many times. There were some moments where it's like, Kristin, just go have a break. We're gonna keep working on this part.
A couple of
So-
moments right to go. I don't know if I can make this go. Give me just a minute to check.
But it turned out beautifully. I'm just so pleased with it. So Joe and Elaine, we've known each other not quite as long as I've known Kristin, but around the same amount of time, because Kristin and I met in undergrad in like 2001. And then I met you through, was it through Chad and Eleanor?
It
Yes.
was, yeah.
Yeah, so some other musicians I knew, Chad Martin, who's a composer, Eleanor Martin Johnson, who's at that point was singing and studying musicology. And I wrote some music for her as well. And we started having these like Schubertiads at Eleanor's dad's place, right? These sort of casual concert evenings. And so I wrote a piece for your trio. Here's a plug for you folks. Tell us about Junction Piano Trio.
Well, Junction with Stephanie Chua and the two of us, we do a lot of music for 3 pianists in different formats. And we just did an album that included a piece by Alex entitled Big Money, which comes from a larger set. But Big Money is kind of the one that we've done the most. And so that was exciting. We just kind of were working on our albums almost simultaneously. Or
Yeah.
we were just a little bit ahead of you.
You were ahead of me in editing, and we were originally going to release right around the same time in October, but Paul and I we needed more time to work the magic. Yeah, you know what? I never let Daniel plug his series, and I've already, Daniel, come back here. Tell us about your guitar concert interview series.
So I have a similar, I've started a live stream series called Concerts for the End of Time. And
Which we are living in.
Yes, we're. I mean, it's obviously a hyperbole, but it's also a reference to Messiaen. It's a reference to classical music in the context of the time we live in, and the logo is like a plague doctor, stylized, of course, in a more friendly way. And yeah, we just it's run by me, and I just invite performers every 2 weeks to play on the channel, and they do live stream concerts, and they're very high level musicians from all over the place. They're all Canadian based, although many of them live in different parts of the world, and it's really great. And all the donations go directly to the artists, so it's
awesome.
Raised over $8,000 for artists in the past year.
Wow, that's great.
That's fantastic. Could you share a link in the Facebook chat? That'd be great, and I can plug all these things later when I share the video. So let's talk to Joe now. So Elaine and Joe are often playing together, but for this album we had them play separately. And I think, did you flip a coin for who's going to play what, or was it just about availability or something? Because they have a little kid, and we had to trade off every rehearsal, every recording session. We could never have you in the room at the same time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the way it's been in the last couple of years. But yeah, as far as who chose
No,
what,
I don't remember.
it might have been
Might
that
have
we
been
flipped a coin.
Might have been like, you take that one, and if you take that one, obviously, and
Yeah.
I do the
Yeah.
other.
Or a date thing.
Something.
Yeah.
Well,
Might have been.
They're extraordinarily different pieces. Like we talked a bit about with Stolen Child, Elaine was playing a bit of a pastiche, that it's different styles, but they blend, and it's mysterious and it's dark. But then Joe, you played these Dennis Lee songs, right? And let's listen to, well, first we're going to watch yours. We're going to actually hear a bit of the same song twice, but it's different versions. So here's Joe in the studio playing a little bit of a piece called Can You Canoe? Yeah, so they're just warming up. That's obvious. It sounds more put together on the album, but that's a tricky piece too, because originally it was written for string quartet. So that's the first piece Kristin and I ever did together. We had, what were they called? The Downtown String Quartet. It was
I think you're right. I think that's right. Yeah.
Premiered on your recital in the summer after I
Yeah.
graduated.
Yeah,
and you were doing like
2001,
yeah, something like that. And so these pieces are they're children's poems, including very famous one called Alligator Pie, but they're from the three kind of 1970s, 1980s books by Dennis Lee, who was Toronto's poet laureate and probably is best known for those kids' poems. So there's the books are Alligator Pie, Garbage Delight, and Jelly Belly. And although my kids try to destroy them, I still have the original copies, like from kind of first, second editions that like I grew up with these. So these matter a lot to me as a kid, in my early 20s when I wrote these pieces, and still now. So Joe, I made this piano version for you. What's it like to play something that frequently has like 8 things going on, or at least 4, because it was written for 4 string instruments originally? Like you can hear that in Can You Canoe, there's all the stuff going on. Like what's it like to play a piece like this that's a transcription of a string quartet?
Well, it wasn't that bad. I think you did a good job, Alex, of setting it for the piano. And a lot of times with piano playing, we're so often trying to make it sound like a string quartet or a symphony when we're playing something that was written for piano, that just trying to get the layering and the polyphonic independence and the different lines and whatnot. I think Alligator Stew had some really tricky things in it, right? Where there's, the pinky's doing a bunch of repeated notes while the lower fingers are playing different smooth chords, and then there's bouncing slurs in the tenor while the bass line is smooth,
Well, yeah, it starts with like a 3 or 4 voice fugue kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
With like sul ponticello tremolo for strings, and if you want to hear that original version from the premiere recording, it's up on my SoundCloud, so you can compare. So Joe had to like evoke this somehow. So
But
bravo.
I like that challenge.
And this is also a piece with a lot of pastiche in it, because we did 6 songs out of the original 8 for the album, and each one of them has a different feel. And not only that, but it like riffs, it like quotes music from that feel. So Can You Canoe is meant to sound like a Canadian parlor song from the like early 1900s, and it actually uses a song called Paddle Your Own Canoe, which was a hit of 1908 or something, which Mary Lou Fawless recorded on her album of those songs called Prima Donna on a Moose, which I loved at the time. So that's that whole introduction is quoting that Paddle Your Own Canoe. But then what does Alligator Pie quote? It quotes like Hockey Night in Canada's original
it
theme.
does. Yeah, it has that in there.
Give me back my hockey stick.
Yeah.
And there's all this stuff. And then like Summerhill Fair quotes Summertime by Gershwin.
Yeah.
There's like, I lost track. So that's another kind of pastiche. We are going to play one more clip and then wrap this up. And then I hope you'll all stay, because what I'm going to do is post the link to this Zoom, and you all, our lovely audience, are welcome to come and join us and bring your own drink. I've got my Japanese whiskey here. So whatever, if you need to run and get something, that's fine. So I'm going to play the clip of Kristin doing her own version of Can You Canoe, which is a bit of a parlor trick she does, where she's actually playing and singing at the same time. Not live, but it was...
I was playing both at the same time.
No, it was live when she recorded it. I mean, she's not doing that and being on Zoom right now.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. And then we'll tell you where to buy this album. And then I'm going to do some thank yous. And then I will open up the Zoom. And for people who come to the Zoom, please type in your real name, because I'm going to write them down, and I'm going to get kind of like a spinner gizmo going. And I'm going to spin for a couple free copies of the CD and like mail them to you and stuff. Okay, so stick around for that. That's why it's important to put your actual name, because until you come on Zoom, I don't know who you are. Who's watching, and I have to write it down. All right, so let's watch Kristin doing her own 2 hands, 1 voice version of Can You Canoe.
Nowhere near as good as Joe's playing.
Very different. You had to adapt it, right?
Can you canoe
but I cannot canoe at a 1:45. In a van when the traffic jam. Can you?
That's a very different approach than we had on the album. I think we recorded you saying, "Can you?"
Yeah,
in
like
these,
a million times.
which is meant
that
to be
I think
a
we have
pun.
100 takes of.
Yeah, and then Paul and I had like a really pleasant time in the summer, like listening to all of these like 12 times. Like, what do we want? And we almost always took the first one. It's fun. It's sort of funny thing. Like often the first one's the most naturalistic and like fun, right? Yeah. So I'm just gonna wrap up the live stream portion and then invite people over to Zoom. So first of all, Kristin, let's tell people where they can buy this album. So it exists as this physical CD, which I had printed limited edition. And thank you to Kristin, who actually designed the graphics, although the art is by a man who
by
lives,
someone else.
Yeah, his name is Michael Hersrud. And we
And
found
they're
him online.
amazing.
Yeah, we just searched for like Voyager graphic art. And these are actually from a series of graphic art pieces he did that are literally inspired by the Voyager NASA missions. And they like follow the root of it or something in this abstract way. And he let us use these for free. So big shout out to him. I'll post a link to his stuff. So I'm selling these through my website, but they're also going to be sold on Bandcamp. And I'm just going to screen share that Bandcamp link. This album was put out by Redshift Records, and the best place to buy it is on their Bandcamp page.
Yeah,
so
which you can get to by bit.ly/smalldistantworld, right?
That's correct. And I'll also post it endlessly, which I do. And here's what it looks like. Here's the Redshift logo. So they are a small independent record company out in Vancouver, BC. And they have produced, as you can see, a whole bunch of albums, 61 releases so far. And they also produce concerts. And it's just done as a voluntary thing by Jordan Nobles. So a big thank you to him. So the album's there, it's all there in full, and you can listen for free. But if you want to buy the digital album, it's $10 or more. But $10 is what they charge for that. And the CDs are going to be $20, I believe, and that includes shipping. It's the same cost on my website. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Music or all those things out there. It is everywhere. Don't buy it on iTunes because I will never see that money. If you're going to buy it, the place to buy it is here on Bandcamp.
Support the artist.
Support the artists. I got to break even on this project. So I'm going to say my little thank yous. And then if anyone else has any, I'd love you to jump in after this. So where did I put my thank you list? There it is. So first of all, for funding, I'd like to thank the Canada Council for the Arts, without whom we could not have made this album. I couldn't have paid these musicians for their studio time. I couldn't have paid for the studio. I couldn't have produced the physical CDs. That stuff is super expensive, right? So thank you. That without that grant, this would have been impossible. I'd like to thank the Redshift Music Society and Redshift Records, who are the label that we put the album out on. And thank you again to Jordan Nobles, who runs that as a voluntary service and does a great job. For publicity, I'd like to thank Nick Storing. Nick, I don't know if you're watching right now. Nick is also a great composer, but he has a publicity business through Riparian Media. He also manages concerts through Riparian Acoustics and has lots of great albums himself. We had additional publicity assistance by the Canadian Music Centre, who will be distributing CDs eventually once they're open again. Ooh. And also the Alliance for Canadian New Music Projects has been very helpful at getting the word out. Thank you to the people who gave us permission to use their texts. There's only two because most of them are public domain or written by Kristin. So Don Thomas, who translated that poem by Anna Akmartova you heard earlier in this live stream. And also, of course, Dennis Lee, who has given me permission several times over the years to use his words. And I've met him a couple times and he's just tremendous. I can't wait to get this CD into his hands. And thank you to everyone who worked on this album. So people who were with me today: Kristin Mueller-Heaslip, Jennifer Tran, Daniel Ramjatan, Paul Talbot, Elaine Lau, and Joe Ferretti. Thank you so much. And finally, thank you to my incredibly supportive family, my wife, Kaylee, my two kids, Robin and Jacob, who you might have heard in the background at one point today, my dad, my sister, my extended family, everybody who's been so supportive along the way. Kristin, do you want to jump in and thank anybody?
Yeah, as well as, I want to second everything you said, obviously. But I'd like to thank my friends Mark and Hillary and Celeste who put me up during the recording process because I live in Montreal
Right.
now.
That's right.
And that saved a lot of budget for hotels and things like that. And it was great. And I don't know, the studio we recorded at Union Sound Company or whatever it's called, they were pretty great. And I thank you for dealing with our weird stuff,
That was a
your classical
fantastic
music
place.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is a place that I will absolutely go back again.
Yeah.
They have a beautiful room and a beautiful piano. They're kind of a
They
jazzy
do.
one.
And a nice selection of tea. When you're recording an album, you're standing with your mouth open, breathing out for
Yes.
hours and hours at a time.
And it was
So
so cold.
it was
right? Do you
super
remember that? The
cold.
studio
It was-
itself was
yeah.
nice and warm, but out in the rest of their building, which is an old warehouse, right?
Yeah.
And outside, it was like the cold snap right at the beginning of January 2020.
Yeah, and it was
Feels like a year ago,
You
'cause
just
it is.
get like you turn into like jerky. You just get so like dried out. So like I just drank tea the whole time, and they have an excellent selection. So if you're recording an album, go there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So folks, I am going to, why can't I see where to do that? I'm going to post, oh, here it is, the link to the Zoom chat. So there it has gone. So you can all come on over there now. Please make sure it shows your real name so that I can write them down. And then at some point, a few minutes in, I'm going to spin for a couple of free CDs. Okay. I've got my Japanese whiskey. I'm going to demonstrate that it's party time by taking off my tie. I'm
Bow
going to,
tie.
this is
I'm
probably
gonna go
what
get my glass of wine.
Bill
I did
Nye
not
does
bring-
at the end of
Yeah.
a science episode. I can't get it off. Anyway, I'll do that in a moment. So I will have to let you all in to the Zoom because it has like a waiting room. So you'll all start showing up in about 5 seconds is my guess. And I'm going to end the live video on Facebook. So thank you everyone for watching here. And if you're watching after the fact, please share it or something and go listen to the album and maybe buy it. We'd love that. And thanks for all my guests today. All right.